But let's move on to our, for the YouTube listeners, our little versus segment here. We're going to talk about three guys. Each of us are going to give kind of a take. We'll give a little bit of pushback, and then we'll just kind of say when we have them. A couple of these guys, I'm going to guess, are going to go really fast, and one of them is probably going to take a little bit longer. Believe it or not, I am not going to be the long-winded one in this one. But we are going to start with Florida teammate Alijah Martin. Martin is he's a December 26, 2001 birthday, so he's 23. His rookie season will be his age 24 season. This is an older guy. So even though I am going to give the positive take, everything I will say will kind of be, through that realm, through that lens of he's older, and he's kind of small, 6'1.5" without shoes. So about, if he's listed 6'3", it's kind of barely. Does have a 6'7.5" wingspan, which is good but not great. Crazy explosive vertically. Obviously, that's obvious on tape. This season, for a national champion, 14.4 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.5 steals, 0.2 blocks. Notable that Walter Clayton did have more blocks per game than him. Kind of funny. He did that on 45.2, 35, 76.1 shooting splits. He started his career at Florida Atlantic, and he played 4 years at Florida Atlantic before transferring to Florida. And he was a big piece of their Final Four team, right? He was, I think I saw a stat that he was the first player to ever go to the Final Four with two different teams, or start a game in the Final Four on two different teams or something like that. He have an 8.5 box plus minus, 121.3 offensive rating, 20.6 usage rate, 54.7 effective field goal rate, 57.6 true shooting. Though I will say that the offensive numbers, matter obviously, but that's not really the sell. He did dunk 28 times, shot 66.4% on close twos, 37.5% on long twos, 76.1% from the free throw line. And while he only shot 35% from three, he did take a lot, 226, good for 11.1 3-point attempts per 100. And he's always taken a lot, as throughout his career at Florida Atlantic, he always took, around 11 or 12 per 100. He's never shot a great percentage other than his sophomore year. He did shoot 39.6% on 187 total. The sell here is, hey, how much do you like Lu Dort? Maybe this guy could be Lu Dort. It's really that simple to me. I don't think there's a ton else here. I think it's really simple. He's a pretty good on-ball defender who's really strong. He flashes some great screen nav. He has active hands. And the way I'd put it is this is the type of defender whose value might kind of boon in the league, right? He's strong. He's long. He has, a really good motor and activity, and he's pretty smart, right? He's willing to just kind of make predictions. He's trying to figure out what the offense is doing and blow it up somehow. He's not an elite steal or block rate guy, like I said. It's 2.7 steal rate's pretty good. He's had above 3% steal rates in the past. Like, I think he can be more of a havoc creating guy. But really what you want him to do is you want to put him on, a Devin Booker and say, Devin Booker's going to get his, but Martin's going to do a really damn good job on him. He's going to really make his night tough. And I think there's at least a world he can do that, right? He's strong. He is long. I think his lateral quickness is not great, but it's not bad. I think the screen nav is better than he got to show because, again, Florida was so focused on, hey, we want to send guys into our bigs. We want you to kind of be aggressive following and see if you can get back taps and see if you can get steals as they try to dump it off to the big man on rolls or whatever. And so he did a lot of that, but I think he's adjustable enough defensively. And then offensively, you hope that, hey, every once in a while we're going to run a gadget play for you to get a dunk. You're going to make your open corner shots, wing shots, 50-50. And then hopefully, you can attack a closeout simply for a layup or a dunk if the defense is in, complete rotation. And hopefully you can pass well enough to operate an offense, off the ball. He's not a point guard despite the size. He has no point guard equity. He's not a quick enough decision maker. He does not process particularly well, but he is a fairly low turnover guy. 13.1 turnover rate this year is pretty good. He's, fairly efficient at the rim, nothing crazy. And again, he's taken and made a solid amount of threes over the course of his college career. So the bet is the defense is great, the offense is passable. I don't think he can beat to the level of either of those things, honestly, as Lou Dort. So, like, I don't see, like, starter here with Alijah Martin. But the sell is that, hey, this can be, like, a valuable piece of a rotation, through his 3-and-D, kind of archetype, even though he's position locked as a 2-guard. What questions or pushback do you guys have on that?
I mean, for me, it really does come down to, like, is he an NBA? Can he exist in the NBA offensively? I don't really know. He just does not seem to have, for as much feel at times he possesses defensively. He just seems to have zero awareness of where anybody is on offense. I think he is a bad passer, but I think a lot of the low turnover rate was because the guys he was passing to were just able to get themselves really open. They ran a lot of stuff where, Clayton and Will Richard are coming off of screens and he's just passing to them because their defender is caught up on a screen and they're wide open. He's passing to the very first person he sees, basically every time. And I think that, it's really difficult to buy the shooting because the touch looks fine at times, and at other times it looks pretty bad. It's really from shot to shot, inconsistent. And I just don't know what I could bank on him doing offensively in the NBA to make the defense worth getting on the court.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that is stand in the corner on certain things, back cut, make simple enough passes as a connective guy. I think he can actually be a pretty solid transition guy because I think the first step is pretty good, and obviously the explosion, is pretty good. Like, he dunked quite a bit in the half court, and he's a pretty ambitious, dunker off the dribble. He tried to dunk on JoJo Tugler, and it was unsuccessful. If he can just make enough shots to get half a closeout, I think he can be a fine transition player. He gets up pretty quickly. Like, again, he missed quite a few dunks too, but he's not like a top percentile. Like, he's not VJ Edgecombe as a leaper. But your hope is that, hey, you can be a fine transition guy in the half court, stand in the corner, do something simple. Or if we're running a play, can you take a couple dribbles and make the correct pass to run this play? I think you can do that fine. Like, again, it's really simple. It's sort of a bench role as like a fourth or fifth option on the floor at any given time, with the outlier upside of, hey, I think he can be a good trade. Like he runs hard in transition. He has a good feel for angles and lanes, and he's a solid closeout attacker when there's no help at the rim. He does struggle, like you said. If there's a lot of help at the rim, he's not good because he can't really hit pull-up shots, and he's not a very good passer in any sense on the move. So you don't want it too complicated, but as someone who could eat minutes in the regular season, especially, and then in the postseason limit his role more, I think there's some upside here to him being like kind of a surprising, 9 point per game guy where it's 1-3 and one transition attack, gets fouled once and it gets one layup, and then one baseline cut for a layup or a dunk or something. Like, I think there's plenty of path there to be solid if you buy that the defense is the level that it can get to. Coop?
Yeah, that's my question for you is, do you think that the defense is at the level where it's worth guy who doesn't have a bankable skill on offense and also isn't like a good enough shooter to necessarily demand a closeout level? Do you think that a 6'2" guy who's not, his main defensive skill to me is toughness? Is that something that you're willing to bet on him being passable on offense? You know what I mean, and I sound stupid trying to word it, but yeah,
for him to be barely passable on offense. Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is the question, and this is where we get to the meta a little bit of, for the sake of the argument, I should say yes, absolutely, but I have my questions, right? Like, I agree, and to be honest, I think Alijah Martin is exactly the type of defensive player that tends to get overrated. Like, he's really strong and long. He looks like he should be super impactful on the ball. but he's kind of not. Like he doesn't really seem to be consistently there's not a ton of tape where you're just like, man, he had that dude in a box. Like he could not go anywhere. He's kind of jumpy and he wants to kind of get his hips forward. He wants to swipe at the ball hard. He fouls a little bit more than I would like, so I don't love it. But like I said, I do think this is the type of guy that his defense could, maybe pop more in the league. And again, especially in the regular season where, hey, like he's always going to bring that toughness and he's always going to bring that intensity. The motor is legitimately really good. And every once in a while, if he can just crawl into like a smaller guard or, even I think this is the type of guy you could put on like, not Katie is like an extreme example, but you could put on a Brandon Ingram and he could really bother him, right? Where it's like, oh man, like I just can't get any leverage on this guy. The only thing I can do is take this long contested shot, and he's going to do a better job contesting it than a lot of guys would because he's kind of small. He has good anchor. I think his upper body strength is good. His lower body strength, I think, is good but not great, and that does affect his quickness. But overall, I think that he's a fine defender with paths to being a more valuable defender than who he is right now once he gets to the league. But you're saying, is he worth that bet? It kind of depends. We'll talk about value in a little bit, but I would say at a certain point, yes. Like I do think he is at least a two-way guy for me. If we're ready to transition to that. Do you guys have any other thoughts or questions or put back here on Elijah?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has, like you were saying, the transition because his top end speed is really good in transition. He can accelerate quick. He is super long and strong. Like he's guarding up at times against wings and stuff. But in the NBA, I don't think when it comes to this level of height, when you're 6'2", like margins matter a lot. We just talked about it with Clayton. In when you're 6'2", I think you have to be like an elite defender when you're this level of offensive player. I don't think Martin is that. I think he's a good defender. I think he is strong. He's elite. He's not an elite defender, and I think that really hinders sort of the outcomes for him where he's a successful rotation player. It's possible, but it's much more difficult when you're that height and you're not coming in as somebody that's a top tier defender. I have him in someone like I would maybe consider giving a 2A to in that sort of tier. I don't know exactly the number yet numerically, but I wouldn't draft him, but I'd maybe consider throwing him a 2A depending on if my priorities all got scooped up.
I like him a little bit more than that. I think he's probably the first, be a priority UDFA who I'd want to give a two-way slot to. I do think that there's something to be said for being a two-way is fucking hard. Going back and forth between the G League and the NBA team and going from taking buses to private jets and then flying halfway across the country to go play a G League game and then coming to ride the bench on the NBA team where you don't get any minutes, but you still have to dress out. You got to be really tough to do that kind of thing and still be ready to play if your team's winning by 40 with, in the fourth quarter. Or half your team's injured and you need to go in and play. And I do think Alijah Martin is a guy who can do that, and he's tough. And you want guys who are tough and who won on two ways, and not every – with how hard it is to develop in the G League, I do think that two ways are more just for the guys who you think could, you want in your locker room and who you think could come in and play a role when the time is right. You're not and I think Alijah Martin could do that, right? So I like him more than Will Riley and Hanson Yang in that role. But I wouldn't draft him like I would a guy like Saraf, right? Who I'm betting on to be a real, I'd probably give both of them two ways, but I wouldn't want to draft Alijah Martin in the second round because there's not that outlier skill that I'm betting on, right? You're just betting on toughness. And sometimes toughness and winning basketball games is enough. And maybe it is for Martin, but
yeah, I actually think he'd probably be a priority 2-rounder for me, like a real actual 2-way target, not just a whatever type of guy. Because I do think Coop makes a good point. There's kind of two types of 2-way guys. There's the guys that are kind of big question marks that I want to see. Generally, those are the guys I'm more looking to draft on 2-ways. And then there's the guys who can, in a pinch, can like actually do something on the floor for you in the NBA. I think Martin, for what it's worth, just by his toughness, his age. Again, his reaction time and like natural feel in basketball is not very good, but his intelligence is good. Like he's just a smart player, and that stuff. Like I think he can survive on the floor in the NBA fairly early in his career. Not be good, not be a positive, not be someone that teams are excited about necessarily, but can survive. And I do think there's an outlier world where, he is that top percentile of toughness guys that just stick around way longer than you think they should because they're just so tough and can do just enough. Like this is a guy I could see in 8 to 10 years, people being like, man, like that's such a great veteran leader. Like he sucks now, but he's such a great veteran leader. And you're like, you look back at his career and you're like, oh man, he like never really started. He was never really particularly good, but he was on a couple good teams and he kind of brings an identity, and I do think that stuff matters in a way we don't often give credit to. It doesn't matter enough that I would draft it, but it matters enough that I'd get him on a 2-way and then say, hey, in the regular season when you're in the doldrums and, you're playing a game that you probably should win and you're not winning for whatever reason, Alijah, get out on the floor, see if you can get us a loose ball or something and stand in the corner and hopefully we'll drop it down to you and you can dunk in a way that everyone is just a little bit surprised by. So that's my Alijah Martin take. All right, this is the one that's going to take forever. So let's get it out of the way now. Stone, would you please sell us on one Max Shulga? Now, before you do, I will quickly give his age and some measurements here. Shulga, for what it's worth, played 3 years at Utah State before transferring to VCU. And he was a fifth-year senior. So this is two straight guys we're talking about that are fifth-year seniors who are auto-eligible. Walter Clayton was a fourth-year senior that's auto-eligible. This is kind of the double year of people leaving. He's a June 25th, 2002 birthday, so he's 22. His rookie season will be his age 22 season. It'll be his age 23 season. So he's a little bit younger than Alijah, I believe. For some measurements here, for what it's worth, he is from Kiev, Ukraine. So I'm going to root for him a little bit because there's not enough great Ukrainian basketball players. I love Sviatoslav Mikhailuk, but other than him, it's kind of lacking. I looked it up, and the most minutes anyone in the NBA has ever played from Ukraine is Alex Len. So it's about darn time we get a little bit more Ukrainian representation. But Shulga measured 6'4" 1/4 without shoes, so a pretty real 6'5", 6'5" 1/2, 6'5" 3/4 wingspan, 8'3" standing reach. He would be a kind of slightly undersized 2-guard, probably. Maybe he was a average size 2-guard in general, but maybe undersized for like top end 2 guards. But would be a really plus size point guard, which matters. He did average 15 points this year. 5.9 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.8 steals, 0.1 blocks, 43.5, 38.7, 78.3 shooting splits. He was there's some interesting advanced stats. I'm not going to say them all, but just the interesting ones. 3.3 steal rate, 23.2 assist rate to a 13.9 turnover rate, and did take 9.93 point attempts per 100 possessions. Stone, I know this is your segment. I talked too long already. Why do you like Max Shulga so much?
Because he's good. He's a good basketball player, and he's coming into the league as a good basketball player. I think he makes a lot of great decisions. He has a good shooting record, and I think watching him this year, I think he's a really good bet to shoot. Not as any sort of nuclear guy like Walter Clayton or anything, but I think he's a guy that's going to be pretty consistent from three. not super versatile in the way that Clayton is. I think he's more of a catch and shoot guy, but he's really good at making extra passes as a connective guy. I do think he has lead initiator equity, which is a big sell for me. I think Shulga's the type of guy you can play on or off ball at times, and I think that's a really big sell for me. Um, maybe I'm bearing the lead here a bit, but like his motor is just crazy. I think that you anytime you watch him, you can just tell this guy wants to win. Like he's doing anything on the court he can to make sure his team is winning, and I think that matters a lot. That's a guy I want to invest a lot in because obviously he cares about helping my team win. He cuts with purpose, and he times his cuts really well. When he is playing off ball and in the defender's not even expecting it because the defender's face guarding him. He'll just sidestep him and burst anyway. There's no there. You're not taking away cutting from Shulga no matter what angle you're playing, and I think that is really important. He is obviously a bit limited athletically, like he doesn't have a ton of explosion as a finisher. He's not. I wouldn't say he's a bad athlete in the way. Like it's not disqualifyingly bad. Like I think he's a better athlete than like we talked about with McNeely, but I don't think that he's any sort of good athlete or anything. Probably below average, I would say. He does have to like slow down to turn the corner, coming off of screens both on and off ball, and I think that matters. His deceleration isn't great, but he's just a good decision maker. He can shoot really well. Has on and off ball equity, and he just really wants to win. Like, and that pops through every time you watch him. So I'm pretty sold on Shulga.
Okay, so my question for you is, what is he positionally in the NBA? Do you think he's like a hybrid combo guard? Do you think he's a point guard? Do you think he's a shooting guard? And specifically, talk about it in general, but then specifically defensively, who does he guard?
Yeah, I think at least offensively, I think he's kind of whatever you need for that team on any specific roster or on that any given night. I think can sort of switch between being a point guard or a shooting guard if you need. And I think that's for me a big sell to be able to be that kind of guy. If you need him to be an off-ball catch and shoot guy, and you have a primary initiator, I think he can do that. If you need someone who I think probably is best as a primary initiator against like backup units and stuff. I don't think you probably want him to be your starting point guard. But I think he has that within him too, right? You can, in a pinch against more backup units, be your primary initiator, and I think that has value. Defensively, I think that he's just not someone that is really multi-positional in the way that he's offensively. Like I don't think that he's quick enough to really guard a lot of the burstier guys, and long enough to guard like the longer, rangier off guards. But I think primarily I would prefer him to be against most shooting guards, I would say, most off guards defensively, because I don't trust the lateral speed against a lot of the quicker point guards. But I think that he is kind of strong. Like he's not like outlier strong. He's not like Elijah Martin or anything, but I do think that he is got a bit of strength to him and can hang at times with more off guards. So that's sort of where I envision the defense. He has really good awareness, I think, and that leads to a lot of sort of off ball opportunities for him where he's picking steals off him because he has the motor. He's really gunning and running towards those off ball passes. Where even though athletically he's limited, he times things so well, and he cares enough that like the will just pops for him to get to the ball. So that's sort of where I envision him defensively.
I guess my big question is this a guy who you think athletically can keep up with the NBA? Because it feels like a lot of his scoring is very he wins on a lot of small margins at the moment, and he wins pretty well. But I do worry that the athleticism, as good as the motor is, I do worry that the athleticism isn't good enough in combination with the motor to consistently do what he does against NBA level defenders?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just the games I watch. I don't think he's a terrible athlete. Like he's not good, obviously. I think he's below average, but I don't think he's like a disqualifyingly bad athlete. Like I think that um, he's just not in the range of those guys. Like I don't think he's a meaningfully like way worse athlete than Yakachonis that we talked about. And Yakachonis isn't a good athlete, but I think he's pretty passable. Like he's going to struggle. That these guys like obviously are never going to have the lateral quickness, never going to have the foot speed to ever not be bad in those specific areas. But I don't think they're like excessively slow to a way that they're just unplayable or excessively weak. I think that's the other thing is like Shulga, like I mentioned, he's strong. He's not like crazy strong, but he has a bit of strength to him. And I think that, these guys are never going to be able to overcome those foot speed concerns. And that's something you obviously have to consider. But it's not to the degree where I think that it's just impossible for them to be NBA players because of it.
Yeah, so my big pushback is I do think that the athleticism is pretty close to disqualifyingly bad offensively. Not all the way, but he just didn't create enough advantages for me. Like off the dribble, he was a pretty bad off the dribble shooter. He was in the 36th percentile on 95 off the dribble shots. So teams could kind of get away with going under. Now, for what it's worth, the jumper itself has like improved. I watched him at Utah State, and he was not a very consistent or high volume jump shooter. Like that's improved, but for like a point guard, I think teams can guard pick and roll too easily with him, and I don't think he punishes teams enough for that. You mentioned that the decel isn't great. Like that's what he's really missing, I think, is he's not a great top end athlete in terms of being able to get to certain places at the top end, but he's also not a great decel athlete to really mix it up. Like his best isolation stuff is to create space for jumpers. Well, he's a bad off the dribble jump shooter, so it's kind of that's a pretty big concern for me. Defensively, I actually thought that the athleticism is fine laterally. I think he's fairly strong. I think he's actually pretty good guarding one-on-one. His screen nav's not great, and the closeouts aren't very good. That's the big issue is you can't like quickly change direction. But I do think he's a good one-on-one defender. I think he's a really good, smart passer. I think he's a fine off-ball shooter, but not a great one. So like I understand a lot of what you're saying. I just don't think he's a good enough ball handler or advantage creator right now, even in pick and roll. And he's not quite like crafty enough post dribble. He can't really turn things in Barkley. Like he's at his best when he can find a way to get an empty side, and he uses his strength to get one bump and then finish with a shot blocker having to come from the other side of the rim. Like that stuff is good, and I do think, like I said this jokingly to you, I do think like the path to NBA success here is kind of like the TJ McConnell route, where it's like he's just so tough and the motor's good and he's just kind of good enough. I don't think he has the quickness or the mid-range touch of TJ McConnell. Like I don't love his mid-range counters. I just don't think he's quite good enough at anything offensively, if I'm being completely honest. Even though like I actually think the defense is maybe undersold by the level of athlete he looks like. Like I think he's a pretty solid defender on ball. He makes good decisions off ball. He's just not a great change of direction athlete, but I think he'd be a fine defensive player for this archetype. Like I think he could be, at or slightly above the level of like an Austin Reeves defensively, or probably even a little better, right? Maybe getting into that like Quentin Grimes level defensively. I think that's like absolutely realistic for him. But I just don't think the offense is good enough. Like I think the pathway for him is actually point guard. I don't think he's a good enough shooter to be a shooting guard. Even though he made shots this year, and it's improved, which is great. For what it's worth, 93rd percentile, 136 catch and shoot shots, 65.2 effective field goal rate. Like that's a really good number, but they're pretty simple. He's not really taking them off movement. I just don't think he's the type of off-ball player, and I kind of disagree. Stone, I know you like his cutting. I didn't really like his off-ball movement in general. I thought he was kind of stagnant, but I I just don't think he's good enough with the ball for me for what I think he is. So that's part of why I'm out. So do you have any pushback on me there, or what's your take on what I said?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously not the same level of prospect, but like I think there's for me a lot of parallels in terms of how he succeeds to like a Pajemski, where he's got he's not the level of shooter Pajemski was, but I personally buy the shooting I think more than you, where I think he's a pretty decent catch and shoot guy. He can operate off ball, can operate as being a secondary ball handler. In a pinch, you can make him the point guard, right? But you're probably not doing that against starting units. It's more secondary units. He's got just this level of will that I think Pajemski also parallels, where these guys just like want to win every time you watch them. Like they're doing everything they can. Defensively, I think that I mean, as the highest guy here on Shulga, I think I'm probably the lowest maybe on the defense. Where I think he's probably best against two guards just because the strength is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the route, right? Is secondary off ball guy in starting units, hopefully, and then in the pinch, is your backup point guard and has the level of toughness to really get into passing lanes. Can be a scrappy rebounder. I don't think he's a great rebounder, but I think that he really goes for boards and fights amongst bigs a lot of times, even if he's not coming out with the boards and makes the effort. I don't know. I mean, I think he's just a really good basketball player, and I value that if I'm trying to win basketball games.
Are you guys fine jumping into just value and where he's on our board? I struggle a little bit with Shulga. I want to be where you are, Stone, because I like some of the stuff. My worry is offensively he wins on tiny margins, and I don't buy a ton of it. And there's too many question marks for me to have him as a first rounder. I think I would love to get him in the late first, early second, right, with a pick where I do also think the type of defense he plays is super valuable. I think just high effort, gives a shit, it is all over all the time, and like actually impacting plays. He's not just like flying around, fluffing and buffing shit. He's out there causing chaos genuinely in a very real way. And I don't want to use white guy to white guy comps, but this is it is, Caruso light-esque, right? Where he's just all over bothering everyone. I don't think he's like a lockdown point of attack guy like a guy like McConnell, but it's a valuable type of defense for a guy with his motor. And that's a guy worth taking a swing on, even if the offense is just kind of bullshit. I think you can just kind of bet that you can throw him in the corner and that he can punish a team messing up low man rotations. And, if a team throws a small guard on him, he can back cut him or I think you can get enough out of his off ball play to make the defense valuable. So I like him as a second round guy. I'd take him, I probably like, Will Richard a little bit more. I think Will Richard's toughness is just on another level, but I like Shulga as a second guy to him in that priority second round guy range for me. Bryce, where you at with him?
I do think it's interesting that we all have very different views on who he actually is. For what it's worth, I probably wouldn't give him a full contract. He's a draftable two-way guy for me, and that I think there's real upside here. But for me, it's as a point guard. Like I like the defense. I don't think the defense is good enough that like that's the sell. So I think it's interesting that we've all kind of come away with different takes here. But for me, I think the upside is this is a jumbo point guard. I think he could be better in transition than he got to show some this year. I liked his hit-ahead passing. Catching defenses off guard with like early drag screens and stuff. I think could potentially be good. I think he'd be good enough as an on-ball defender. I don't think he's going to be great as an off-ball defender, and I don't think he can lock up your best guys. I think he can just be passable, provide some energy. I think he contributes as a rebounder, all that stuff. But I think the real value is, hey, this is a bigger point guard. If he's a shooting guard, he's borderline undersized because the wingspan is even. If he's a point guard, he's big. and he can take advantage of his vision and intelligence and hopefully mitigate some of his finishing issues and continue to develop the shot more as a point guard. That would be that's my sell for Shulga as an NBA bet, and for me that's worth a draftable two-way. I have him right below Will Riley. There's certain teams where I'd take Shulga above someone like Will Riley, but I'm not crazy into anything here.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm obviously the one highest on him. I have him as a first rounder. This is a guy I'd be happy to take in the first. I have him still kind of playing around numerically. He's one of the guys I'm waffling with between 21 and 24, along with Walter Clayton. He's in that range for me. Still trying to nail down the order, but he's solidly in the first round for me.
All right. Are you guys ready for me to fight for the honor of the pride of Australia, the Duke defensive devil, Tyrese Proctor, 6'7" demon from Duke? Bryce, give us the numbers so that I can get into fighting here.
Absolutely. I know you're dying to defend the honor of Tyrese Proctor. At the Combine, Tyrese Proctor measured 6'4" with a 6'7" wingspan. So again, 6'5", 6'7" wingspan, average to slightly undersized for a shooting guard would be really big not really big, but fairly big for a point guard. I actually think those numbers are fairly similar, lower wingspan, but fairly similar to like Tyrese Halliburton, which is somewhat worthwhile. He's a April 1st, 2004 birthday. He was an April Fool's joke, obviously, April 1st. He's 21 years old. His rookie season will be his age 21 season. So for what it's worth, he is pretty young as a junior. He's kind of young for his class. He's from Sydney, Australia. This season, during his junior year, he averaged 12 points, 3 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.1 blocks on 45.2, 40.5, 68 shooting splits. Some more advanced stats. He had a 6.1 BPM, which is one of the lowest amongst the Duke guys. He had an 18.7 usage, 57.4 effective field goal rate, 58.7 true shooting. The athletic indicators are really bad. 2 offensive rebound rate, 9% defensive rebound rate, 0.4 block rate, 1.6 steal rate, 20.5% free throw rate. Those are all really bad. 8 dunks, though, not horrible. Shot 54.3% on close twos, 50% on 64 long twos. Again, 68% from the free throw line, but only took 75. The vast majority of his shots came from 3. He took 220, shot 40.5%, which is 11.7 per 100. Just an overall, shooting heavy stat profile here. So, Coop, what's the sell on Proctor?
The big sell with Proctor is this Duke team was insane. It was a juggernaut, and he was a key part of the starting lineup. He spaced the floor for them. He moved off the ball, hit open shots that were generated by their offense and by multiple NBA players who were attacking and creating advantages. He was able to capitalize on them. I wouldn't say he was exactly a connector, but he took a fuck ton of threes and he hit a fuck ton of threes. He got in, he could set up their offense, he could bring the ball up the court, he could do just enough. He wasn't a weak point defensively. I'd say as much as he's like 6'4", 6'5", and like almost smaller wing sized, he was much better guarding smaller guys, like guarding down the lineup and just using his length to bother smaller players. I think that would be his like main thing, his point of attack on smaller guards, chill out, hit your spot up shots. I think that's a role in the NBA. As much as he was sold as so much more coming in and he was overtasked with a lot of what Duke wanted to do, I think the big sell is just go out there, attack some like easy closeouts, hit some long twos, hit some tough shots if in an emergency, but mostly hit threes, defend small guards, do your thing, be a cog in the machine, and actually bring stuff to the floor that NBA teams actually need. So I'll take questions from the crowd, even though I know you guys don't have any because he's such a flawless prospect.
So if he's a shooting guard, how is he going to defend NBA shooting guards?
He's going to guard small shooting guards and point guards. I think that's kind of the sell, is you put him next to a primary who can actually create advantage, who's a little bigger, allows you keep your size advantage and you keep your length. You're able to throw him into like a zone. You're more easily able to go into these different looks defensively because of his size. And you just let him go to town on small guards. I don't think he can guard NBA twos. Is kind of the problem.
Do you think he could then, at least like do some light version of initiating? Like, is that in the cards for him? Like, at least bringing the ball up some, even against pressure, and getting teams into offense, even if he's not like the point guard that's running pick and roll?
I think he can dribble the ball up the floor. Next question. No,
for what it's worth, to do a little bit of the work for you. In the past 2 years, he did have a 20 and a 21.7% assist rates without having like really awful turnover rates to boot. Now the free throw rates were still bad, the dunks were worse, all this stuff. But he did like play some point guard in his college career, and even this year, you might say he was the nominal point guard. Sion James brought the ball up some, Flag and Knipple brought the ball up some, but Proctor is who you would have listed at the one, so you could make an argument there. So I see what you're saying. I think for me, this is just my biggest pushback, because he just feels like a guy without a position right now. And that's kind of my worry. And I'm not sure he's quite a good enough shooter to overcome that.
I think my answer to that would be he doesn't handle pressure, but I think that if you're going to throw like a TJ McConnell or a full court pressure guy at him, in the NBA, he's just so tall, he can kind of just pick up the ball and pass it ahead. I think he does simple stuff fine. I think the big problem with him as a point guard is that he's too simple and he doesn't actually make a ton of advantaged reads, and he's not a particularly good ball handler. And there's all these problems with him as an actual one. But I think there's value in a guy who can grab and go or just take the ball up the court, because sometimes you just need a wing who can come into the backcourt and alleviate the pressure off of your actual ball handler, or a guy who can just take it up because your other ball handler is streaking down the floor, and you just need a guy who can take the ball up the floor and make basic passes. And I think he can do that, even if he won't be able to handle much pressure. So, Stone, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think in order for Proctor to work, right, it's going to come down to being more of a really like a 3-and-D guy that can maybe make some passes, connective passes. How real, in order for that to work, obviously he has to be a pretty decent 3-point shooter. How real do you buy it? Just to like sort of paint the picture, he from his first year to his second year at Duke, his field goal percentage increased, from 38% to 42%, and then this year it took another 3% jump, and then for a total of 7% increase over his time at Duke. And then from 3, it increased at 3% his first year, and another 5% this year for an 8% increase total. And it's on very minimal attempts. Obviously, you mentioned the free throw rate, only 2 attempts a game, but during that time, that went down 19% from when he first started at Duke. Some weird indicators there, like how on film it's kind of it was a lot easier to buy this year than it had previously been to buy him as a shooter. But how real do you think of a shooter he is in order for this sort of role to make sense?
I mean, I think he's pretty solid, as much as the free throw shooting is up and down, or I guess we could just say down. His sample size is so small. I prefer to look at his career. First career, he's a 77% free throw shooter. And then for his career from 3, 36.5%, good size. I'd say he's a legit 6'5", 6'6", decent length. I do think that this is a guy who can shoot the ball off spot ups. Do I buy anything else as far as his shooting? Do I buy any versatility outside of 3? No. So I don't know. I think he can hit a spot up. I think he at Duke learned how to hit a spot up. I think his relocation got better off the ball. He learned how to play off of better players as the years went on. And, sometimes for better players, you got to just be able to hit a spot up. And I think Proctor could do that just fine.
Yeah, I think the real sell with not to get ahead of you, Coop, but as we transition a little bit to value, I think the real sell with Proctor is this is a guy that just kind of knows how to play basketball and has a pretty good kind of just natural cadence and feel. And he's fairly young, right? He's been productive as a younger guy. He's been on good teams. There's a sell here. There is. I just don't buy it. Like, Proctor's just not a guy I'm in on. I don't think he's athletic enough. I don't think the feel is good enough. I don't think he's tough enough. And I don't think he's quite the level of shooter he needs to be. I wouldn't really be rushing to give him a two-way. I have him currently right now. Proctor's the last guy on my board. I think I probably lightly prefer Chaz Lanier, just lightly. Listen, that's, again, no ill will towards Proctor. And I kind of liked Proctor during his freshman year. And I do think there's still something here with just, hey, you can kind of get to his spot and rise up and make a mid-range shot here and there, and just kind of do some things, and he might be unlocked a little bit more in the NBA. And there's value to just being someone who has been in different roles and had to do different things on good teams and has done those things, somewhat well. But there's just nothing I really buy here in terms of its NBA translation. He might stick around the league for a little bit. The truth is he's a Duke guy. But he's not Gary Trent. He's not I think the real hope here is this like bigger Quinn Cook. And if he's bigger Quinn Cook, great. That's absolutely a worthy, probably even first round pick. So if you really think he's bigger Quinn Cook, be really high on him. That's fine. But I think the upside's too low, and the downside for all these guys is nothing anyways. And I think even if he hits, he's not exactly a player I like particularly value. So I hope I'm wrong, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'd have Proctor. I'd want him on my summer league team. Maybe give me someone to space out and, again, maybe bring the ball up here and there. But to me, he's not a guy I'm like really interested in developing.
I guess I'm assuming I'll be the highest on Proctor. I'm not like crazy high or anything, but I'll give the positive spin of, I think, if he defensively can, even if he's a one positional guy defensively, and hit threes, and be more of a connective passer rather than a lead initiator. And I think we have buried the lead a little bit as to why he can't be that primary initiator, which is the fact that he just predetermines everything to the nth degree. Like he's just every single pass that he makes he's determined to make it regardless of what the defense does. That's sort of been a problem with him all the way since NBA Academy stuff. Like he's just always been this guy, and that hasn't changed. And, the fact that it hasn't over the past 4 or 5 years, sort of, you can draw the conclusion that it probably won't. But if you can put him in a role where, defensively, he's against point guards and he can shoot open shots, and he makes some tough finishes around the rim. He has decent touch around the rim, I think. To me, that there's upside to be an NBA rotation player, right? Like I watched a lot of Lakers, and Gabe Vincent played a decent role. He's not the level of shooter Gabe Vincent is, but like there's a role in there for him. So for me, this is like a priority two-way guy. He'd be someone I'd definitely want to get as a two-way if I could. But I'm probably not looking to draft him with a top 60 pick.
Guess what, everyone? I fucking tricked you because I don't like Tyrese Proctor that much. Boom. Mic dropped. He's just not that good. He's not very switchable. The whole point of having size is that you can get rebounds and not give up your size on the boards and guard multiple positions and have a bunch of length in the lanes. And Proctor just doesn't do any of the things that a guy who's 6'5" or 6'6" at the guard spot should be giving you. I get Duke's a great rebounding team. I am 90% sure that every single offensive rebound he grabbed this season was his own miss that he knew was going to be off the second it left his hand. I don't think he ever fought for another offensive board that he wasn't personally invested in like that. The fact that you're 6'5", 6'6", and can't guard twos or threes, embarrassing, honestly. I don't think he's a particularly good ball handler. Duke it just looked like a worse team when he was on the floor than when he was off. And like, if you can't contribute to that Duke team, I don't really have a reason to think you're going to contribute to an NBA team. I do think he can shoot threes. I do think he can defend ones. Those are two things that are valuable on an NBA floor. I have him as a two-way guy. I don't think he's like the worst player in the world. I like him more than Wolf, but I would rather take the swing on like Janai Broom, just like grabbing rebounds and being a dick than I would on Proctor's like maybe shooting. So that's where I'm at. Everyone got fooled. I'm an elite trickster. I know you'll never trust me again, but I promise this is the last time, everyone. So
crazy manipulation.
Yeah. Yeah, and no one will even understand why you have Posh Alexander in your little bio thing either. That's exclusive. But no, that's all we got. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video talking about these three guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this kind of new format. When we have these guys who clearly can't probably handle a video on their own, putting them together, having some fun with it, trying to mix things up. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit the bell for some notifications. We are, as we record this, as you guys listen will be later, but as we record this, about 15 days or so from the draft, something like that. And so, hopefully you guys have been enjoying and you guys are looking forward to more content. And I hate to call it content. I shouldn't call it that. But anyways, for Coop, at Ali_Coop, for Stone Out Report _Court, I'm at Bryce114. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a like, rating, review, all that fun stuff. This has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you.